The thunder rolled across Mercy Falls like God himself was bowling strikes, each boom echoing through the valley with enough force to rattle window panes and set dogs to howling. Rain fell in angry sheets, turning Main Street into a river of mud and washing away what little hope remained in the drought-ravaged town. And there, at the edge of it all, stood the Blackbird Inn, its weathered sign creaking in the gale, a solitary light burning in the upstairs window where Eleanor Walsh kept her lonely vigil. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Some folks said she was a fool for staying after the mining company pulled out, taking half the town's jobs and most of its future with it. Others called her stubborn to the point of madness. But Eleanor didn't much care what people called her these days. She had watched the exodus, first the miners, then the merchants, finally even Pastor Miller packing up his Bible and heading east to more prosperous congregations. By the time this storm hit, Mercy Falls was running on fumes, a ghost town in the making. Eleanor wiped condensation from the window and surveyed what remained of her world. The inn had been in her family for 3 generations, built by her grandfather when silver was first discovered in the mountains. In its heyday, each of its 12 rooms had been filled with travelers, the dining room alive with conversation and laughter. Now, dust gathered on unused beds, and she hadn't cooked for a paying guest in over a month. The bank had sent their final notice last week. 30 days to settle her debts or face foreclosure. Eleanor had folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer of her father's desk alongside the deed and the obituaries. Her parents 5 years back, her husband Thomas just 18 months ago. The typhoid had taken them all, leaving her with nothing but debt and memories. A violent crash from the back porch startled her from her thoughts. Eleanor grabbed the shotgun Thomas had insisted she learn to use. "Never know what sort of folk the road brings," he'd said. She'd never fired it at anything more threatening than a rattlesnake, but the weight of it felt reassuring as she made her way down the narrow stairs. The back door rattled in its frame as if something or someone was leaning heavily against it. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. Mercy Falls had its share of drifters, desperate men moving west in search of work. Most were decent enough, but these were hard times, and hard times bred hard choices. "Who's there?" she called, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I've got a gun, and I know how to use it." A weak laugh answered her, followed by a racking cough. "Don't doubt it, Ma'am," came a ragged voice, "but I don't think I could run even if you missed." Something in the voice, pain, perhaps, or resignation, made Eleanor lower the shotgun slightly. Cautiously, she approached the door, keeping the weapon ready. "I'm coming in," the voice warned, followed by another bout of coughing. "Just seeking shelter from this hell of a storm. Swear I mean no harm." Eleanor steeled herself and unlatched the door. It flew open with the force of the wind, revealing a figure slumped against the doorframe. The man was tall and gaunt, his clothes plastered to his body by the rain. His face was obscured by a dark beard and the wide brim of a sodden hat, but she could see blood seeping through his shirt at the shoulder. "You're hurt," she said, stating the obvious. The man raised his head, and Eleanor felt her breath catch. His eyes were a startling blue, bright with fever, set in a face that might have been handsome once before hardship carved its lines into it. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. "Just a scratch," he mumbled, though his pallor suggested otherwise. He swayed dangerously, and without thinking, Eleanor stepped forward to brace him. He was surprisingly light for his height, as if he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. "Come on," she said, making a decision she prayed she wouldn't regret. "Let's get you inside before you bleed to death on my porch." Thunder crashed overhead as she helped him to the kitchen. Up close, she could see his clothes were of good quality once. though now threadbare and patched. Not a common drifter, then. She eased him into a chair by the stove, where a pot of stew had been simmering all afternoon, a habit from busier days that she couldn't seem to break. "Got a name?" she asked, as she fetched her medical supplies, keeping one eye on him, and the other on the shotgun she'd propped against the wall. He hesitated, eyes darting to the side as if weighing his options. "Cole," he finally said. "Cole Warren." The name struck a chord of memory, but Eleanor was too focused on his wound to place it. She set down a basin of water and clean cloths. "I need to see that shoulder." He nodded wearily and began to unbutton his shirt with clumsy fingers. Eleanor helped him peel the blood-soaked fabric away, revealing an ugly gash across his shoulder blade. It wasn't a knife wound or an animal attack. She recognized the jagged tear of a bullet. "Someone was aiming for your heart," she observed, keeping her voice neutral. Cole's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." She cleaned the wound in silence, grateful that the bullet had only grazed him, though the gash was deep and angry with infection. As she worked, Cole's eyes roamed the kitchen, taking in the large stove, the row of copper pots, the pantry door standing ajar. "You run this place alone?" he asked, his voice stronger now. Eleanor nodded. "My husband passed. Typhoid. I'm sorry." The simple words held genuine feeling, and Eleanor found herself responding to it. "So am I." When the wound was clean, she applied a poultice of herbs and bound it tightly with strips of linen. "You've lost blood, and there's infection. You need rest and food." As if on cue, Cole's stomach growled audibly. A flush of embarrassment colored his gaunt cheeks. "When did you last eat?" Eleanor asked. He shrugged his good shoulder. "What day is it?" She didn't answer, just ladled a generous portion of stew into a bowl and placed it before him with a chunk of bread. He stared at it for a moment, then at her, as if suspecting some trick. When she nodded encouragement, he fell to eating with the controlled desperation of a man long accustomed to hunger. Eleanor turned away, busying herself with tidying her supplies to give him privacy in his need. Outside, the storm raged unabated, rain hammering the roof like impatient fists. She was just putting the kettle on for tea when a sound from Cole made her turn. He had frozen with the spoon halfway to. His mouth, his eyes fixed on the wall behind her. Following his gaze, Eleanor saw what had caught his attention, the framed newspaper clipping her father had hung years ago. "Notorious Warren Gang robs Central Pacific Flyer," the headline screamed. Below it was a grainy photograph of 5 men, one of them circled in red ink. In an instant, the pieces clicked into place. Cole Warren, the infamous outlaw whose gang had terrorized the railroads and banks across 3 territories. The man who had robbed the very train carrying the mining company's payroll 6 months ago, essentially signing Mercy Falls' death warrant. Their eyes met across the kitchen. Cole set the spoon down slowly. "You know who I am now," he said quietly. Eleanor's hand inched toward the shotgun. "I do." To her surprise, he made no move to stop her, just sat there with a curious resignation. "Guess you'll be wanting me to leave, then." A dozen responses rose to Eleanor's lips. This man and his gang had doomed her town, hastened its decline by robbing the very train that might have kept the mining company solvent enough to stay. She should march him out into the storm, or better yet, hold him at gunpoint until she could alert Sheriff Parker in the morning. Instead, she found herself asking, "Can you still eat with a reputation that size?" Cole blinked, clearly thrown by the question. "Ma'am?" "The stew," Eleanor said, gesturing to his half-finished bowl. "It'd be a shame to waste it. And you look like you haven't had a proper meal in months." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, his face cracked into a genuine smile that transformed his features, erasing years of hardship. I can still eat. Eleanor pushed the shotgun a little further away and sat down across from him. And then finish your supper, Mr. Warren. We can decide what to do about your notorious status after you've had something warm in your belly. The rain continued to pound the roof as Cole resumed eating, more slowly now, savoring each bite. Eleanor poured herself a cup of tea and watched him, wondering at her own actions. Perhaps she was as mad as the townspeople thought. "Why'd you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Rob the mining payroll?" Cole's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, considering his words. "We didn't know it was the mining company's money. Just another railroad job." His eyes met hers, unflinching. "But I won't pretend we'd have done different. If we had known, that money might have saved this town." "This town was dying long before we came along," Cole replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Those mining companies, they come in, strip the land bare, work men to death and leave when there's nothing left to take. I've seen it a dozen times across the territories." Eleanor wanted to argue, to defend Mercy Falls, but the truth of his words stung. The Pinnacle Silver Mining Company had worked their claim for 15 years, pulling millions in ore from the mountains while paying the miners barely enough to survive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When the richest veins ran dry, they began scaling back, cutting corners on safety, pushing men harder for less pay. The robbery had been the final blow, but the foundation had been crumbling for years. "Where's the rest of your gang?" she asked. Instead, a shadow crossed Cole's face. Around, laying low, things got complicated after the last job. "You mean you got shot?" He grimaced. "That's part of it." Eleanor refilled his bowl without asking, noting how his hands had steadied. The fever still burned in his eyes, but some color had returned to his face. "You need rest. There's a room upstairs you can use for tonight. In the morning." She trailed off, unsure how to finish. "In the morning, I'll be gone," Cole supplied. "You have my word." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. It was madness to shelter an outlaw, to feed him, tend his wounds. But something in his manner, in the gentle way he'd spoken despite his obvious pain, made her want to believe there was more to his story than the lurid newspaper accounts. As she showed him to a small room at the back of the inn, Cole paused, in the doorway. "Thank you, Mrs." He stopped, realizing he didn't know her name. "Walsh," she supplied. "Eleanor Walsh." He nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. "You've shown me more kindness than I deserve, Mrs. Walsh. I won't forget it." Eleanor left him there, returning to the kitchen to clean up. As she worked, she found herself listening for any sound of movement upstairs, half expecting to hear him ransacking the few valuables she had left. But the only sounds were the continuing storm, and eventually the creak of bed springs as Cole settled in. She checked the front and back doors, more from habit than fear now, and made her way to her own room. The shotgun remained downstairs, a decision she couldn't quite explain, even to herself. As she lay in bed listening to the rain, Eleanor wondered what morning would bring. Would Cole keep his word and leave? Would he rob her before going? Or would the law arrive first, having tracked him to her door? Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of empty rooms and foreclosure notices, of Thomas coughing blood into a handkerchief, of a town slowly dying around her. Sometime in the night, the storm finally broke, leaving behind an expectant silence broken only by the steady drip of water from the eaves. Eleanor woke at dawn from force of habit, though there were no guests requiring breakfast. For a moment, she lay still, listening for any sound of movement in the inn. Hearing nothing, she dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, bracing herself to find Cole gone, possibly along with her meager cash box. The kitchen was empty, the back door still locked from inside. Frowning, Eleanor climbed the stairs again and approached the room she'd given Cole. The door stood ajar. Pushing it open, she found the bed neatly made, the room swept clean of any evidence he had been there. On the pillow lay a folded piece of paper weighted down with a silver dollar. Eleanor picked up the note with trembling fingers. Mrs. Walsh, a debt repaid is still owed when the heart remembers. Look to the dawn. C.W. Puzzled, she moved to the window and pulled back the curtains. The rising sun cast long shadows across Mercy Falls, illuminating a sight that made her breath catch in her throat. Men on horseback, dozens of them, streaming into town from the east, their saddlebags bulging. At their head rode a familiar figure, his blue eyes visible even at this distance as he directed the riders. Some headed toward the abandoned mining office, others to the boarded-up general store. A group broke off toward the church, whose roof had partially collapsed during the winter. Eleanor rushed downstairs and out onto the porch, heedless of her disheveled appearance. As she watched in disbelief, the men dismounted and began unloading their saddlebags, tools, lumber, supplies. A tall, dark-skinned man with a carpenter's belt approached the inn, tipping his hat respectfully. "Ma'am," he greeted her, "name's Eli Jackson. I understand this place needs some repairs before the new guests start arriving." Eleanor stared at him. "New guests? What are you talking about?" Eli grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "You haven't heard? The railway's extending a new spur line through Mercy Falls, connecting to the Southern Territories. Construction starts next month. Crews'll need somewhere to stay." He gestured to the inn. Cole said this was the finest establishment for 50 miles, said the owner had a gift for hospitality. Before Eleanor could respond, more riders appeared, wagons following behind them laden with goods. She recognized the shopkeeper from Silver Creek, the next town over, directing his sons as they unloaded crates of provisions. Nearby, a man she didn't know was examining the abandoned smithy with an appraising eye, while another measured the broken windows of the general store. "I don't understand," Eleanor said, her voice faint. "How, Mrs. Walsh?" She turned to find Cole Warren himself standing at the bottom of her porch steps. He looked different in the morning light, stronger, more commanding, though the shadow of pain still lingered in the set of his shoulders. Behind him, a group of rough-looking men waited respectfully, their faces weathered but their eyes alert. "What is this?" Eleanor asked, gesturing to the activity transforming her dying town. Cole climbed the steps slowly, stopping a respectful distance from her. "Let's just say my associates and I came into some funds recently that needed investing. You're rebuilding Mercy Falls. Why?" His eyes held hers, blue and steady. "Because you didn't ask who I was before you stopped my bleeding. Because you shared your food when you barely had enough for yourself." He paused. "And because some debts can never be fully repaid, but a man should try anyway." Eleanor's mind reeled, trying to make sense of it all. "The railway spur? Is that real?" "It is now," Cole said with a hint of a smile. "Amazing what can be arranged when you know which palms to grease in the territorial capital." "But you're outlaws," Eleanor protested, though she kept her voice low. Cole shrugged his good shoulder. "Maybe we're retiring. Maybe we've found a better use for our particular skills." He gestured to the men behind him. "That's Eli, our carpenter. The big fellow by the church is Dutch, best stonemason west of the Mississippi. Isaac over there can fix anything with gears or steam. The Callahan brothers know horses better than most men know their wives." He turned back to her, his expression growing serious. "Every man here has a past he'd rather forget, and skills the law doesn't always appreciate. But they're loyal, hard-working, and they owe me their lives a dozen times over. I've asked them to help rebuild this town, and they've agreed." Eleanor struggled to find words. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep running this inn," Cole replied. "Say you'll give these men a chance to prove they can be more than what the world has named them." She looked past him, to the activity in the street, to men working with purpose and care, to hope being rebuilt plank by plank. Then she met Cole's steady gaze again, seeing in it something she recognized, the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had kept her in Mercy Falls when everyone else had gone. "All right, Mr. Warren," she said finally, "but I'll need help with breakfast if I'm feeding all these men." Cole's face split into that transformative smile again. "I make a decent Blackjack, Mrs. Walsh, and Eli's cornbread is famous in 3 territories." As if on cue, Eli called out, "Coffee's ready, boss, and Mrs. Walsh's stove is a beauty. Already got the biscuits in." Eleanor found herself laughing for the first time in months. "You've made yourself at home rather quickly." "Home," Cole repeated, as if testing the word. "It's been a while since any of us had one of those." The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the storm clouds, as Eleanor and Cole walked together into the kitchen. Already the sounds of construction filled the air, hammers pounding, saws biting into wood, men calling instructions to one another. The scent of coffee and biscuits mingled with the clean smell of rain-washed earth. Eleanor didn't know what the future held, whether Cole Warren and his men would truly leave their outlaw ways behind, whether the railway spur would bring the promised prosperity, whether Mercy Falls could be reborn from its ashes. But as she watched Cole roll up his sleeves and settle comfortably into her kitchen, as if he belonged there, she felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, she realized. A fragile, tentative thing, but growing stronger with each passing moment, like the town outside her door. 3 weeks passed in a blur of sawdust and possibility. The Blackbird Inn hummed with life as Eleanor cooked for 20 men with hearty appetites. Her kitchen a command center where she directed the rebuilding of not just her business, but her spirit. The ledger beside her bed grew fat with advance. Bookings from railway scouts and construction foremen, all eager to secure lodging for the coming months. Sheriff Parker had arrived on the 4th day, drawn by rumors of strangers in Mercy Falls. His hand had hovered near his pistol until Cole stepped forward, speaking in low tones that Eleanor couldn't quite catch. Money changed hands. Not a bribe, Cole insisted later, but a community investment fund, whatever its name. The sheriff departed with a peculiar smile and hadn't returned since. On this particular morning, Eleanor watched from the newly rebuilt porch as Cole directed the raising of the general store's roof. Despite his wounded shoulder, he worked alongside his men, leading by example rather than command. There was an easy camaraderie among them that spoke of years riding together through hardship and danger. "Coffee?" she offered, extending a steaming mug. Cole wiped sweat from his brow and accepted it gratefully. "You're spoiling us, Mrs. Walsh." Eleanor," she corrected him. It was the 3rd time she'd done so, and still he maintained the formality, as if crossing that line might unleash something neither was prepared to face. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched. The town's transformation. The church steeple had been raised yesterday, its bell polished to a shine. The saloon was serving drinks again, though the owner, a former barkeep from Tucson with a mysterious past, insisted on watering down the whiskey for Cole's men until their work was done. "Why'd you really do all this?" Eleanor asked suddenly, the question that had burned in her mind for weeks finally escaping. Cole studied the horizon, his profile sharp against the morning light. "I told you why. You told me a pretty story about repaying kindness. But this," she gestured to the bustling activity around them, "this goes beyond repayment. This is..." She searched for the word. "Redemption?" Cole supplied quietly. Eleanor nodded, something tightening in her chest at the raw honesty in his voice. Cole sipped his coffee, gathering his thoughts. My father was a preacher in Missouri, before the war. Used to say every man gets one chance to rewrite his story. His fingers traced the rim of the mug. After he died, my brothers and I, we made choices. Bad ones, told ourselves we were fighting back against the railroads and banks that were crushing common folk. Weren't you? A sad smile crossed his face. Maybe at first, but violence has a way of becoming its own purpose after a while. He set the mug down. When you found me, I was running from my own men as much as the law. Things got ugly after the last job. Disagreements about how far we'd go. And now? Eleanor asked. They seem to follow you willingly enough. They're good men at heart. Just needed reminding. He looked toward the church. We buried 2 brothers outside Silver Creek. That changes a man's thinking. Before Eleanor could respond, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. The workers paused, hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons. Cole straightened, eyes narrowing. "Riders coming!" Eli called from the roof. Cole nodded. "I see them." Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm morning. "Law?" "No," Cole said grimly. "Worse." Within minutes, 5 riders thundered into town, their horses lathered and wild-eyed from hard riding. At their head was a man with a shock of red hair and a face twisted by an old burn that pulled his left eye into a permanent squint. He reined in sharply before the inn. "Warren!" he bellowed. "Thought I'd find you playing house." Cole stepped forward, positioning himself between Eleanor and the newcomers. "Maddox, you're a long way from your territory." The red-haired man spat. "My territory's wherever I say it is. And since when do the Warren boys turn carpenter?" His cold gaze swept over the town. "Heard you went soft after Leroy and Jake. Got themselves shot. Didn't believe it till now." Eleanor sensed the tension rippling through Cole's men, saw hands inching toward guns. A single spark would ignite this powder keg. "You're not welcome here, Maddox," Cole said evenly. "Take your boys and ride on." Maddox laughed, an ugly sound. "Or what? You'll build me a nice coffin?" His hand dropped to his holster. "I came for what's owed me. Our agreement was an even split on the Central Pacific job. Your brothers died before paying up." Cole's voice hardened. "There's nothing for you here. That right?" Maddox's gaze shifted to Eleanor, a slow smile spreading across his scarred face. "Seems you found something worth keeping." He cocked his head. "Pretty thing. Bit old, but I ain't particular." The threat hung in the air like a thundercloud. Eleanor felt her blood turn to ice, even as anger flared hot in her chest. "You have 10 seconds to leave," Cole said, and something in his tone made even Maddox hesitate. 10 seconds before you find out why they called us the ghosts of Missouri." A tense silence fell. Eleanor counted heartbeats, watching as Eli and the others slowly surrounded Maddox's gang, moving with the fluid coordination of men who had fought together for years. Maddox's smile faltered as he realized his position. He was outnumbered 3-1, surrounded by men whose loyalty to Cole ran deeper than fear. "This ain't over, Warren," he snarled, wheeling his horse around. "You made your choice. Next time we meet, I won't be so friendly." "Next time we meet," Cole replied softly, "one of us dies." The gang rode out in a cloud of dust and curses. Only when they had disappeared over the ridge did the town exhale collectively. Cole turned to Eleanor, his eyes dark with worry. "Pack your things. You need to leave town for a few days." "I will not," she replied, drawing herself up. "This is my home. I've faced down typhoid, bankruptcy, and the entire town turning its back on me. I won't run from the likes of him. This isn't stubbornness, Eleanor. This is survival." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it silenced her protest. "Maddox doesn't make idle threats. He'll be back with more men. So we'll be ready, she insisted. All of us. Cole studied her face, seeing the steel beneath the soft exterior. Finally, he nodded. Then we prepare. The next 3 days transformed Mercy Falls again, not into a peaceful town this time, but a fortress. Firing positions were established on rooftops. Barricades rose at strategic points. Cole's men drilled with military precision, while Eleanor and the few women who had returned to town prepared bandages and boiled strips of linen. On the eve of what they all knew was coming, Eleanor found Cole alone in the church, sitting in a pew with his hat in his hands, not praying, just thinking in the stillness. "Your father would be proud," she said, sliding in beside him. Cole's laugh held no humor. A gang leader preparing for bloodshed? Doubtful. A man protecting people who can't protect themselves, she corrected gently. A man choosing a better path. They sat in silence as twilight deepened into night. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "If tomorrow goes badly," Eleanor placed her hand over his, "then we face it together." In the half-light, his eyes met hers, questioning, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I never believed in second chances until you opened that door," he murmured. Eleanor closed the final distance between them, her lips finding his in answer to all the questions neither had dared to ask. It was a gentle kiss, tentative at first, then deepening with the urgency of people who knew tomorrow was promised to no one. When they finally parted, Cole rested his hand against her cheek. "Whatever happens, know that you already saved me." Dawn broke crisp and clear over Mercy Falls, the rising sun glinting off rifle barrels and determined faces. Eleanor stood on the inn's porch, shotgun in hand, watching the horizon where dust would announce the coming storm. Cole moved among his men, speaking quiet words of encouragement. When he reached Eleanor, he simply nodded. No words needed between them now. The town clock struck 7, its newly repaired mechanism chiming clear across the valley. As the final toll faded, a rider appeared on the ridge, a single figure silhouetted against the sky. Not Maddox, but a young boy, no more than 15, clutching a blood-stained note. His horse stumbled into town, exhausted from hard riding. "Message for Cole Warren," the boy gasped as Eli helped him down. Cole unfolded the paper, his expression unreadable as he scanned its contents. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Maddox won't be joining us," he announced. "Seems the law caught up with him first. Federal marshals took him and his gang, trying to rob the night train to Denver." A cheer went up from the defenders, tension draining away like water through sand. Eleanor felt lightheaded with relief, steadying herself against a porch column. Cole crossed to her, taking her hand in his. "Looks like we get that second chance after all," he said softly. She smiled up at him, this outlaw who had rebuilt her town, her hope, her heart. "I think we've earned it." Above them, the church bell began to ring again, not in warning this time, but in celebration. A new day had dawned in Mercy Falls, bright with the promise of redemption. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.